I'm Peter Allen, and on behalf of authors at Google and Google University, I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Tony Deifell. Tony is an entrepreneur of long standing and runs strategy projects for progressive online media and independent journalism for a group of investors and a consortium of websites. He's been a founding member of Kaboom, the national market leader for community-built playgrounds and skate parks. It's very hard to think of a cooler job than that. He's worked in media for a long time. He's an anthropology graduate of UNC Chapel Hill and has an MBA from Harvard Business School, as well as having been a fellow at the Kellogg Foundation's National Leadership Program. He's not here today to talk about those things, however. He's here today to talk about his new book called Seeing Beyond Sight. For 5 years in the early 90s, Tony volunteered teaching photography to blind and visually impaired teenagers in Raleigh, North Carolina. And his book today, the book that he's going to discuss today, is a compilation of photographs taken by those teenagers and commentary and interpretation about them and about their experience. I had the privilege of reading the book yesterday, and it made me think of a few things which Tony might touch on or might not. One is simply that reading really is a privilege, and seeing is a privilege, and the ability to do that made me reflect on that. And it's also a way in which we perceive ourselves in the world, and I think much of what the book is about our relationship to ourselves and to others. I thought of a couple of phrases from poetry. Milton, at one point in Paradise Lost, talks about darkness visible. And a number of these images elucidate things that blind people can perceive that we might not necessarily see or notice. And so it again, for those of us who can see, brings that to mind. And then in a poem, Emily Dickinson writes, the poem is called I Heard a Fly Buzz When I Died. And the last two lines are, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. I think a lot of this is about seeing to see, what vision means, what perception means, proprioception, and I'm looking forward to hearing more from Tony. Thanks so much for coming.
That's great. Thanks so much, Peter. And thanks, Alana, for setting all this up, and Alice, and Stephanie, and the other folks I know here, and Chris, who's in Boulder, for hooking them in. So my wife is here, Marty Oakes, and she actually told me recently that I need to get some new clothes because my clothes are just way too old. And I disagree with her because I think my clothes are kind of cool. I have a lot of pairs of tons of ripped jeans. And it's not just like in the knee that they're ripped, it's like down the calf and my pockets are ripped out and I can have a hard time keeping my pants up. But I think they're cool because people pay a lot of money for ripped clothes. I mean, maybe not now because of the financial crisis, but in general this year, people paid a lot of money for ripped clothes. So I thought they were pretty cool. And we were going to dinner at a friend's house in San Francisco. And we needed, I was having one of those days, where I hadn't left the house all day and hadn't taken a shower all day, and I'm sure none of you all can relate to that at all. But I was having one of those days, and we were getting ready to go, and my hair was sort of pushed up on the side like I had just woken up, and we're getting ready to go to dinner, and I had like a t-shirt on from the 1990s or something, and my wife shook her head. And we went out the door, and we had to go pick up some bread. So we went by Dolores Park Cafe. I hopped out of the car, walked up to the counter, and the woman behind the counter just looks at me, and I said, "Can I have some bread?" And she said, in a low voice, she said, "We close in 30 minutes, and if you want to come back, we'll give you some of our leftovers." So I went back to the car, and I told my wife, "Okay, I need to get some new clothes." But this little story, talking about what Peter was talking about how we see ourselves and how the world sees us, this was a little anecdote for me about how important it is on how we see the world and how much of an impact that has on us, on how we see ourselves, how we see the world, but also how we see possibility in the world. It's great to be here at Google, and I'm actually going to start by showing a video. We're going to sort of fast forward. Instead of me describing sort of what the students were like that I worked with, I figured it was better to show video, like videos on YouTube and stuff like that. It gives you a better sense of what you can put put in words. And so we're going to flash forward to today. These are, I basically went across North Carolina and found my old students. The class that we had done was in 1992, so 15 years ago, and I had lost touch with them. So I went across North Carolina, found them, and sort of visited them and filmed it. This filmmaker in LA that's a good friend of mine. And so this is a 2-minute video, and I think he lives in Sanford, North Carolina, and it's a guy named Brian. So it's been 7 years. Hey, I'm Tony Deifell.
Nice to meet you.
What was your name?
David Boland.
David Boland. Good to meet you.
Brian's daddy, or have been for 20 years or so.
He's a good boy.
He's a great boy.
Yeah, he is.
Hard-working man.
Yeah. I asked him, I go, what pictures do you remember taking from 10 years ago, you know? He goes, I remember all of them. And I was like, what's your favorite one? He goes, the pickles.
That's it.
And this is the pickle one.
Yeah.
Brian's a mess.
Used to, y'all, I'd cry. God, I'd cry, and I'd say, God, why my baby, you know? Because I've never been around nobody blind in my whole life. And one day I was over at the Social Security office, and I see these 2 little white-headed women over there. And that woman told me, she said, honey, don't you know God only gives special babies to special mamas? And you know, to this day, I've never cried again because I feel like I'm special to have him.
That's nice. I like it when it gets like this because it's like, it's not dark yet, and it's not cold yet. It's like a great time of day.
It's sort of plain weather in a way.
What's in the backyard? Can you tell us or show us what's in the backyard?
Yeah, why not? But I gotta be careful because before y'all come, I found one of Samson's holes he dug, but I didn't get hurt. I'm pretty tough about that.
No, who's Samson? Is Samson this dog here?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Samson.
Here he comes. He's tied. He's all chained up, huh?
Yeah. Did he wag his tail when I caught him?
Yeah, he's totally wagging his tail.
Samson. Come here, Samson. How you doing, boy?
Do you ever play basketball? You ever shoot baskets?
Sometimes.
Yeah. So how do you know where the thing is? You just keep on shooting and people give you feedback? And
Yeah.
Tell you where it is?
Let me
see
get
here?
here.
Oh shit! You got it almost.
Oh man.
I shouldn't cuss.
Oh,
Aim
man.
a little bit more to your left. A little bit more to your left.
About right here.
Oh! That hit the back of the room and bounced out. It's like so perfectly close. There you go! Yeah! There you go. That was awesome. So that's a little clip from Brian, and we're putting all these things into film that we're doing following up with the students, but I'll show a couple more at the end that are just little 2-minute tastes of where the students are today. So a lot of times people ask, like, how do blind kids take pictures? And in many ways, it's a little bit like that video, in that they listen to the world around them. They get cues from their environment, and they aim. So it's like Brian was aiming towards the hoop. We call the program sound shadows because it was a metaphor. They listen for shadows instead of look for shadows. And if you're using a point-and-shoot camera, it focuses for you. You know sort of where the focal plane is, and you can photograph the world around you. And they'd ask questions about their environment and stuff like that. So it gave them a way to communicate when they weren't normally expected to get a camera to be able to communicate. So the next, I'm actually going to show you some pictures that they made and tell you a couple stories. And I actually wanted to, I think about this work a lot in ways that aren't just about blindness. So I think, for me, I've drawn lessons about leadership and innovation. And everybody has their own definition of leadership and innovation. It's almost like Southern pork barbecue. Everybody has a different recipe. But so for my recipe for innovation would be, it's about seeing things differently in the broadest sense. Now, I know that's simple, but as I walk through this, things get in the way of how we see the world. And that's sort of the key for innovation, is understanding how we see the world in the broadest sense. And leadership is about acting on what you see and also helping other people to see. So when I edited the pictures from this book, and I had them all over tables and everything, I realized that this project wasn't about blindness. It was about seeing in a broader sense. And I learned a lot about how I see by looking at the pictures. And as any good teacher knows, you learn as much from your students as you do teach them. And it's the same with like you all building products here. You learn as much from the users as you do contribute value to a product yourself. So one of the things I'd ask you to do is when I tell these stories, look for yourself in the stories. Don't see them as like cute kids from North Carolina, cute blind kids, and aren't these nice pictures and stuff like that. Look for yourselves in the pictures and how you might relate or connect to them. So the chapters of the book are sort of organized in 5 areas, and it uses the physics of light as a metaphor. So we have distortion, refraction, reflection, transparence, illuminance. And I'll explain what each of those are and tell a story and show you some pictures from each one of them. So distortion is that we don't see the world as it is. Things get in the way of how we see the world. And the stories I have from this is a picture, and I'll tell you each of the students' names when I show the pictures. And they're blind, but there's a spectrum of blindness, if you all know, from low vision, which you can actually, maybe read media if it's up close. Then there's light perception, which they could tell that the light's coming in from this window, and then totally blind. And we had all 3 groups represented in our class. Now, Milette's totally blind, and she took pictures of the lawnmowers and the leaf blowers on campus because she was afraid of them. She was afraid of the lawnmowers and leaf blowers on campus because they would, the lawnmowers, like these big industrial lawnmowers, and they'd be on the middle of the campus, which was sort of like a college campus, even though it was a K through 12 school, residential school. And she had imagined that they'd chase her around campus because they were so loud and it would bounce off all the walls, and she couldn't tell what direction they're coming from. And so she had these dreams that they would chase her around campus. And so she decided to do a photo story and sort of face this fear that she had directly. And then, this is Merlette actually interviewing the groundskeepers and setting up the interviews. And then she's on the tractor that she was so afraid of, just loving life. And one of the things that's really interesting about fear, and fear as a distortion, is that our minds, the way our minds work is that we can mistake salience for probability. And so, like if you think about the Washington, D.C. sniper shootings that happened, everybody in D.C. thought they were going to get shot. Like people were just up in arms, but the probability that they get shot was so low. So our minds can mistake salience for probability, and that's another way that within fear it can distort how we see. So this is a picture that John took, and when it came back in the rolls, we were the eyes for a lot of the students that couldn't see that group, and we would describe the pictures, and they would talk about what they tried to take and stuff. And so we were all excited about the seagulls. We were like, oh, you got these seagulls, and they're going off, and they're in all parts of the picture, and you got some motion, and they're in different places, and you have the contrast, and that's so great. And we went on and on and on about it. And then he just pauses and said, is there a shrimp boat out there? And we were like, yeah, there's a shrimp boat out there. Yep, that's a picture of a shrimp boat. And so for us, it was a picture of seagulls first. For him, it was a picture of a shrimp boat first. And then he went around showing everybody the picture and said, oh, this is a picture of a shrimp boat with seagulls. So it became something else for him. And this is just in terms of paying attention and how we sort of need each other to notice things and see things. We depend on each other to be able to do that. So I have a question about this one. Does this look like a guiding hand or a limiting hand? I'm kind of curious what people think. Is it like a helping hand, a guiding hand? Does this teacher feel like they're guiding and helping or limiting and controlling? How many people think it's helping, a helping hand? Okay, about. One hand is doing one and one hand is doing the other. Oh, that's interesting. Maybe so both. So about maybe a third of the group said helping. How about limiting or controlling? About a third, about half and half. Yeah, I don't know. That was a question for me. And for me, this was in distortion because we think about the teachers we have in our life, or the bosses that we have, or clergy, or whoever is that sort of figure. They help us along and guide us. At the same time, we feel limited and controlled by them as well, and want to escape from that. So I think it plays both roles, and it shapes how we see the world. And then I just love that there's a Mickey Mouse button on her that sort of brings it home. So this story is, Wendy, and John took this, and John was low vision. Oh, no, actually light perception, so we actually had to describe his pictures for him. But when the pictures came back, we would go through his role, and he'd ask about this woman. Is there a woman in there? And we'd be like, yeah, there's this woman that shows up a bunch. Well, what does she look like? What is she wearing? And it showed like Wendy on campus, and Wendy in the cafeteria, and Wendy at the state fair, and just all these pictures of Wendy. And we'd be like, then he'd say, is she good looking? And we'd say, yeah, she has a cute smile. Like, what do you answer to that for anybody, let alone a blind person? Is she good looking? And then he said, yeah, it's my girlfriend. And he cared so much that about what the sighted world thought about what his girlfriend looked like and whether she was good looking, even though that wasn't the standard by which he couldn't see her. He didn't need to know that she was beautiful for her, but he needed to know that the world thought she was beautiful. Yeah.
I was thinking about that when I read the book, Tony, because maybe this is my projection, but it seems to me that his need to know was not for her, but actually for himself. I think we perceive our own value in how others look at
and how others see us. Yeah. So Peter was saying a lot of that had to do with his own value and how he saw himself, and it was how other people see him and how he valued himself. Yeah, totally. And I think that, like, where else does that show up in the world? Like, where else can you see that distortion happening? Do you?
Everywhere.
Everywhere?
I mean, if you think about conspicuous consumption, for example, why do I need a small red sports car? Probably not for me, but because I want others to look at me in a certain way, think of me, our jobs,
Yeah.
that clothes.
Yeah, totally. So I'm kind of curious, what other distortions, can people think of other examples that might fit within distortion? Like, what distorts the way we see in the world? Emotions? Say more.
I think one of the biggest distorters is emotion, because our emotion affect how we perceive things happening.
Ah,
Yes.
that totally makes sense. Any other distortions? So one actually, I wanted to draw one more that's not connected to the book, because these are examples of sort of, how we, like, whether it's fear or standards and stuff like that. But denial is another one. And I was thinking about the business world and what's going on now with the auto industry. And I read this article called Leaders in Denial, and it was by a business historian, Richard Tedlow, at Harvard Business School. And he talks about how only one firm since on the Dow Jones Industrial Average since 1896 is still on that list today. And that like 10% of American companies disappear each year, probably more this year. So, and then he talked about Ford in particular back in 1908 when the Model T was around. They had like 15 million units sold over 2 decades, but it was discontinued in 1927, and they had to retool the whole production line for like $250 million, which is when GM ended up leapfrogging them and taking over market share. And what Richard Tedlow said was that since Henry Ford was such a visionary, but yet why did he fail to see that this was happening? And he talked about how it was denial, about how Henry Ford had all these advisors that were giving him sales figures. He was denying the sales figures. He got paranoid. He fired people because he was so sure he knew what customers wanted. It was all about that the slogan of the Model T was, "It'll get you here and back." So it's just about transportation. At that point, people were getting colorful cars. The market totally changed, and he was in denial about it. So when you think about the auto industry bailout now, I mean, there's ties to there. Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a famous quote from that time, and I believe it's Henry Ford, when people said to him, "Can we have cars in different colors?" And he said, "They can have any color they want as long as it's black."
Totally. Yeah, that hits the nail. So the next one, let's go to the next chapter, refraction. But refraction, I remember from high school physics, is when the light goes through a prism and breaks into its parts. But what's interesting about light is if you look around this room, light isn't something you actually see itself. It's when it's absorbed by things that you can see colors. Or when it goes through a prism, it breaks into its parts so you can see the rainbow of colors. So this chapter is about seeing the fragments in the world, and how we actually we don't see the world as a whole. We only see fragments at any one time. So this picture, what does this look like? And don't be afraid to say what first comes to mind. A what? A noose. What else? A swing? Swing? Any other? A leash? That's good. A swing and a noose are probably the two most common answers, and leash sometimes too. It's actually the handle that rings a bell in a bell tower on campus. And Millette took it, who's totally blind, and this was their dominant experience on campus. The bell marked the beginning of the day, the beginning and ending of classes. It sort of contained their day. So she wanted to take a picture of the bell, but yet this is what her experience of the bell was, is holding this chain to pull it. So she takes a picture of that, but when we lead with our eyes, when we see a fragment of something, we can be completely misled. And not only misled, but to something that's fairly egregious, a noose, a symbol of a noose. So it's just an example, and I think about like, my yoga teacher. My yoga teacher thinks everything can be solved through yoga. Like my back hurts, my yoga will solve it. I'm stressed, yoga will solve it. I have a urinary tract infection, yoga will solve it. So everything's solved through that. So it's like whatever the expertise that we have, sometimes while it helps us, it also can have us see only a fragment of the world. And so this is actually the picture up the bell chain. And Peter, jump in. I love the back and forth. So this is also a fragment, but this is a picture Tamika took, she was low vision, and she actually took a picture looking up the tree, and you can see what the tree feels like. So by looking at a piece of something, sometimes you can see it better than having it mislead you. So it cuts both ways. So the question I have around this is, what pieces do we help others see? And I actually kind of want to turn that around and hear other examples that people might have for that. Like, what do you maybe help others see through your expertise? What does Google help others see?
Well, think about search.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It helps us find things that otherwise would be unfindable. That's our business.
Yeah, and particularly in fragments and being able to connect them, totally. And then what fragments do we mistake for the whole? So the next chapter is reflection. And reflection is about sort of seeing what your own values are, looking at yourself. You only can see the world if you can see yourself clearly. So this is a picture of Travis. And Travis identified as African American. In how he dressed, he said he was from South Central LA, and he was a white boy from Charlotte, North Carolina, never left North Carolina. He did this whole photo project comparing South Central LA to his home in Charlotte. And then when he did this self-portrait, he captioned it, "This is a picture of my real face," which is just so telling in how he identified. And he's one of 2 students who have died since the class ended. He actually died of heart failure. There's a lot of comorbidity that happens with vision and other disabilities and other health problems. This is a picture Antonio took, a self-portrait, and he put the camera up on a counter and did the auto timer for it. And he's low vision. I have a video of him later. And he said, "I'm Antonio, I'm showing my muscles." And then he did this picture of his cousin. This is my cousin Leroy trying to be like me, the mask he wore. The question here is, how different is the mask we wear from who we really are? And I sort of ask this in a non-judgmental way at all, because I feel like we have to wear masks. If you have a cause and you're trying to rally people, if you are trying to get investors to invest in something, if you're trying to get your team to believe in something, sometimes you have to wear a mask of confidence. And what's the difference between that and being able to see what's truly going on? And then I thought, my friend in Boulder actually came up with this, the connection of the motto, "Don't be evil," for Google. It's like, don't be evil. It doesn't say, don't do things that could be perceived as evil. It's about don't be evil. It's about what the values are. And sometimes you actually have to put a face out to the world in order to work in the world as a company. But when it comes down to it, it's about don't be evil. It's about your core values and knowing what those core values and being clear on seeing what those are. So that's reflection. Transparence is about being open and candid and connected in the world, and is about breaking down the barriers.
That's another actually very important quality at Google. One of our
Transparency.
core philosophies is that the more people see and understand, the better the decisions they'll make. And so we try to model that behavior in how we communicate with one another as a company, as individuals. We obviously don't succeed all the time, but the idea that you should be able to see through barricades, through things that otherwise might make your perception faulty or limited.
Yeah. And I think for me, this whole thing is like a journey that it's not a linear journey that you get to a certain place and you don't ever go back. It's like transparency is like hard to do, and you can never be fully transparent. I mean, you always try, but it's this journey to be able to do that. So this is a picture of Billy taking a picture. This is the one picture I took that's in the pictures. And so Billy's taking a picture of Merlet on the right, Reba on the left. And you can tell he's actually holding the camera up to his eyes, but not looking through it. He's sort of going through the motions you go through. You take a picture, and this is the picture he took. So I was interviewing Merlet, who's on the right, the black girl on the right, about her pictures. They were in the photography project later. And the idea of race came up, and what does race mean when you're blind? And then she said, I don't like white people. She sort of came out with, I don't like white people. And I go, what do you mean you don't like white people? And she told a story about how her brother, they lived in a mixed race neighborhood. Her brother was mistakenly arrested for breaking and entering because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And they mistook him for another black guy. And it was a white cop, and that was her experience with white people, her first experience with white people. So that's sort of what she had to stand on in terms of her impressions of white people. And so I said, you don't like white people? And she shook her head. And I go, but what about your best friend, Reba? What about her? She is white. And she said, she is? And I go, yeah, she's white. And I go, she doesn't act white? And she shook her head sort of in her shy way. And I go, well, how does she act? And she said, like us, which I just love, like us. And it right in just 2 words breaks down the us and the them, the language that we use that sort of indicates like those immigrants. Anytime you say us and them, that company, those people, like it was like us. And she knew that Reba was white, but Reba wasn't white like those other people were white. She was like us, and it acknowledges the difference at the same time it finds the commonality, the connection. And to me, this represented candid, like being candid and open and transparent in such a great way. A lot of pictures were missed pictures, like they just aimed too high or too low because they're listening to the world around them. And so Frances took this picture of Ricky, and I asked her, how do you know not to cut someone's head off in a photo? And she said, just ask the person where they are. Which I love, because this is like, even like when you come to work, and somebody has a bad day and they, bite your head off. Instead of like, taking it personally, like just ask them where they're coming from. Ask them who they are and what happened. The same thing happens with whole groups of people. A lot of times, like going back to the race thing, like white people will take it personally if a person of color like gets angry about something. Instead of like taking it personally, ask people where they are. What led you to this? What are the experiences? Maybe you had an experience with a white cop a long ago, and that you're carrying that with you. It's just ask people where they are. And then I think even about customers, like just instead of like not serving customers or cutting their head off, just ask customers where they are. It's the whole thing of like listening to your customers.
Tony, on this picture though, you referred to it as a missed picture, and I'd take another point of view, I think. And as I speak with you, as you speak, I'm conscious of the hundreds of metaphors that we use that are all visual, like point of view. But it seems to me that this picture is an awful lot more interesting than the picture might have been if it had been taken in a more conventional way, because the head frame is the frame comes up to his nose. We end up really focusing on part of the face, in particular, I think the eyes, partly because the boy's eyelashes are so prominent, and it also tells us a lot about the photographer and the person taking the relationship between the photographer and the subject. So it's very revealing, even though it didn't maybe match intention or convention.
So one of the things that's really interesting about what you're talking about is a lot of that comes in the editing process afterwards. And so I think this whole book, it's sort of a journey of both my journey with seeing and their stories and journeys with seeing too, because we chose from thousands of images. And it was the images like this that grabbed your attention, but afterwards, but that wasn't the intention of the photographer. Like she was actually trying to get him straight on,
right,
and was probably disappointed maybe that it went up. Unless she started getting reactions from the world that it was a cool picture, and then she kind of liked that other people liked it and that people saw something in it, and she carried that with her too. So it's a mix. It's about the relationship really between the two.
But photography is always as much about the photographer and the perception as it is about the object, and this just makes that a little clearer. It kind of blows up the myth that photography is an objective representation of what we call reality.
Yeah, and I would totally agree. I think traditionally a lot of times journalists and photographers will try to be more objective and claim that objectivity, but it's never objective. It's always a relationship, totally. And anybody else jump in around this stuff? I mean, we can do questions later, but this is actually interesting if there are questions around anything. So this is, okay. how do we stay connected to the world? So each of these I sort of end with a question. Because transparence is hard. It's a constant journey of practice. Illuminance is the last chapter, and it's about illuminating a bigger picture than we can individually see. And this picture changed my life. This is a picture by Luanda, and she was light perception to low vision, sort of. She could read stuff really, really, really close sometimes, but it was hard on her. She had cerebral palsy. So this picture came back, and as I described before, all these pictures would come back, and we would describe them. And a lot of times when they were so missed picture, like complete ceiling, we would say there was a ceiling, but we'd put it to the side and go on to the ones that they got the way they wanted to get them. So there's a lot of pictures of ground and ceilings. And so I was going through Luanda's pictures, and I said, okay, you've got a picture of the sidewalk, put it to the side. And went to the next one, and she said, no, bring that back. I meant to get a picture of the cracks in the sidewalk because my cane gets stuck in it, and I want to get them fixed. And so we sat down and wrote a letter to the superintendent, and she said, Dear Dr. Breitweiser, since you have the privilege of sight, you probably walk on these cracks every day and don't notice them. But for me, my cane gets stuck, wheelchairs roll off the sidewalk, and it's a problem. And here are pictures as proof of the damage, which is great. And would you please fix them? And they got fixed. But the cool thing about this, there's a bunch of things, but one of the things is that Luanda learned a language that wasn't her primary language. She learned a language that is a visual language to communicate about something that was really important to her. They're normally given Braille writers, these kids. And she was actually given a camera and then used it to communicate in a way she knew would be most influential or important to the superintendent. The second is that cracks represent cracks across all sorts of lines, not just in sidewalks. Cracks across racial lines, gender lines, other sorts of lines that we don't see. I walked on this sidewalk every day and didn't see it for months. I thought this photograph was a mistake, and it wasn't until Luanda pointed it out. And so that still haunts me to this day that I was just totally blind to it myself. I saw it, but I didn't see it, if you know what I mean. And there's a story, actually. I learned an African folk tale recently that sort of fits in this chapter and into the cracks really well. And it's about the creator of the world that had a lamp in her hand that brought light into the world. And she gave the two pieces of light to her sons. She had two sons and gave 2 pieces of light to them. And one day she walked in on her sons fighting over the light, and she got so angry that she throws the lamp down, and it breaks into 1,000,000 pieces and scatters across the universe. And today, each one of us are in possession of one piece of that lamp. But the key is that we think we have the whole lamp, but we just have one piece of that lamp. And our collective work in the world, no matter what type of work we're in, is about bringing those pieces of the lamp back together to make the lamp whole so that light can come back in the world, if you looked at our work collectively. But the trick is that most of us think we have only a piece of the lamp. And you think about the financial crisis that's going on now and how complex it is. So many people thought they had it figured out, that they had the point of view, they kind of knew what was going on with all the systems. Technology probably helped that because people can model that stuff now. People thought they had the whole lamp, and then all of a sudden this happens, and nobody saw it that it was going to come and pan out the way it did now. So that manifests a lot in our world. Peter, anything to add?
How about somebody in the audience? What does this make you think of? This picture in particular? Or have you had an experience where somebody else was able to show you something that you didn't see and it changed your perception?
It's not something I saw, but I saw this program one time where in the Gemini program, when it burned up, when they were investigating, they said it was a failure of imagination because they didn't think it was a dangerous test. In retrospect, putting at sea level, 20 pounds pressure of pure oxygen, anything can burn. But they didn't think it was dangerous, so they didn't act as it was dangerous.
That's a good example. One of the things I was struck by is the famous Google globe that has the light coming out where searches are. All the dark areas like Africa and parts of rural America and stuff like that. That's sort of like the cracks in some ways, and what you all are trying to do to spread that and make everything accessible and usable. So one of the things I was struck by before I show you some videos is I was looking at the Google authors at Google Talks just to see sort of what they were like. And I checked out Barack Obama's, and he had this great quote, which it connects into seeing in such a great way. He said, "The Google story is about seeing what can be accomplished when we believe in things that are unseen. When we take a measure of our changing times and take action to shape them." I'm going to say it again because I just love it. The Google story is about seeing what can be accomplished when we believe in things that are unseen. When we take measure of our changing times and take action to shape them. So for me, that partly is when I thought about innovation being like seeing things that, seeing what was possible, being able to see around the corner, and then leadership being acting on that. It sort of fit into that really well. So I'm going to show a couple videos, and then how are we doing on time? And then we can have some questions. These are all like 2-minute videos, and they're just more little portraits into where the students are today. So this is Antonio. This is sort of a different take on the cracks, actually, in the sidewalk. But it's Antonio who said, "I'm Antonio showing my muscles," earlier.
I need some more work now, cause when I get off, that's all I do is just sit here and watch TV and wait till tomorrow. I've been working for the city for so long.
What did you do before you were a custodian?
Nothing. Ever since I got out of school, I had to wait 2 years for to get the job I got. Won't nobody hire me in Rocky Mountain
Why not?
because of my sight problem. I tried to put in some application without people knowing about my sight, and it still didn't get me nowhere.
Do you think if you told folks that you did photography and stuff like that, they'd believe you though? If they don't give you a job because you're blind and you're able to say, "Well, I'm a photographer." No?
No. They'll probably look at me and laugh. They say, how in the world a visually impaired person can be a photographer?
What would you say?
If people tell me I can't do something, that'll make me want to do it more, so I can show them what I can do. Have you met any famous people out there?
What famous people would you want to meet if you met a famous person? If you want to meet
Somebody that'll help me get into the door.
into what door?
Into the door, money. I like to be rich like those people too. I see them spending their money on ridiculous stuff that I would never spend my money on.
Like what?
Just all these houses all over the place, spending millions of dollars on all these houses and cars. I wanted to get me an Escalade, a Cadillac Escalade. I was gonna try to get one of those probably next year.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How much does it cost?
I wouldn't doubt they probably about 50-some grand or something like that.
And how much you got saved?
Not nothing.
Yeah?
That's why I said probably next year sometime. I probably won't even get one.
How much do they pay you? No.
It ain't worth nothing, just $6.25 an hour. I mean $6.27. That ain't even nothing.
You excited about having a baby?
Yeah, I think so.
What are you gonna do with the baby? You gonna raise him up to be a...
Be something that I can't be,
Yeah?
a lawyer or something. Something like that, making the big bucks, a doctor, scientist, anything but like his father, working as a custodian, getting paid peanuts. I hate that. No 401k plan or nothing. No vacation.
I'm going to show another side of Antonio. He took us driving, which was a little bit of a surprise.
Do you want me to read it to you, or you can't read that, right? How much?
Oh,
How
yeah.
much can you see?
A whole lot.
You get a whole lot. How do you describe your site? Like, if you're going to describe it to somebody that doesn't know anything about like the medical
I drive
terms.
around sometimes.
You drive around?
Yeah.
You got a license?
No.
Would you drive around?
Yeah, just around, this path and all that,
Oh, you're gonna have to show us that then. That'd be cool. Can you show us that?
Oh, man.
That?
Oh, man.
You want to get in here? Come on. You want to get in here with us?
No.
Good. Don't hit anything.
I got you, man. I'm a professional.
Whoa.
What in the world was that?
I think it was the mailbox. Said I put on my seatbelt.
Why?
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know. That's up to you. Hey, hey!
So does anybody ever say you can't drive?
Me?
Yeah. Does anybody not believe you can drive?
I don't mess around with it like that, really.
What do you do if a car comes?
They gonna have to back up, cause I ain't backing all the way back up over there.
Did you ever run into the field? What
I
is
got
it?
it stuck one time messing with it.
You got it stuck?
Yeah.
Around here?
No, on the other side.
You'd be able to see if the other cars came, right? They came up?
Yeah. Uh-oh.
Oops. Oh, that was just a ditch.
Yay.
Do you do this every day?
No. I
For a little
ain't started
excitement?
this. I'm not scaring y'all or anything else.
Just a little bit.
Man,
No, you're not scaring me. No, you're not scaring me.
I'm not gonna hurt you, man. I don't want to hurt myself. I ain't gonna hurt nobody else. Well, we are back safe and sound. In one piece like we left. Well,
We made it.
We are back from that terrifying ordeal.
Yeah.
It was all right, though.
You did great job.
Thank you.
It's a nice blue car you got.
All
Were you
right.
afraid of scratching this one car's out? Why you didn't take it?
Oh, no. I ain't never driven this car before.
Ah. So Antonio works at Walmart now in Eastern North Carolina, and has had a hard time holding a job. But so there's other videos I can show them, or I can answer questions if there are questions. How are we doing on time? Okay, maybe some questions. Yeah, Stephanie.
So how did you pick this region? Why did you go to North Carolina?
Oh, well, I'll answer two whys, actually, since I didn't answer the why I do this, or did this project. But it was in North Carolina because I lived in North Carolina, and I was looking sort of for a volunteer program that was not just a simple mentoring program, but actually would use my art skills. So that's sort of why I did there. And there's a state school for the blind in Raleigh that brought students from all over the state for it. And for me, I did the project because I had worked as a photographer and I was afraid of losing my eyes, almost like a pianist would fear losing their fingers. But I figured, well, I could still take pictures if I lost my eyesight, and then started trying to figure out how I might do that. And that led to thinking, well, kids who are blind probably aren't even given a chance to use cameras. And one thing led to another, and we started doing the project. So it was a little bit like pushing into that fear for me, this project was. So, if not, I can show you the last one, and then people can stream out when they end. And do you want to do that? Okay, I'll do Cassie loves Italian. This just shows you the vigor that these students have for learning in life. It's kind of cool.
I have an Italian club here at school
Yeah?
to teach kids Italian.
And are you president?
Yes.
How many people are in the club?
Let's see. I have to count. I don't think there's very many. I don't think very many people are interested in learning Italian. Arrivederci means see you later.
Arrivederci.
Good error there. Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. Derci.
Derci. Gotta go derci.
Derci.
Ciao bella can also mean the same thing.
Ciao bella.
Ciao bella.
Ciao bella.
Exactly. Lucia in Italy is the saint of light. And this here that I am cradling is a sculpture of Lucia. In one arm, she's carrying like a little candle that shows the light, and on her head, she has like a wreath of candles. Have you heard that Italian song, Santa Lucia?
I don't think so.
You know, the one that goes, Sul mare lucida, l'astro d'argento, l'acida l'onda, prospero il vento, Veni per la Chile, barchetta mia, Santa Lucia, Santa Lucia. And
How does it go again?
I
Just kidding.
we got it. Oh, let me let him pass.
Oops, yeah, there's folks.
Ciao.
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 Ciao. I know some Dutch, but let's see. I know dag and ja. What else do I know in Dutch? I think that's about it. It's like this. I had a dream one time about something Italian. I'd come down with this virus called Italian pneumonia or something like that. Mama thought it was just a regular cold or flu. But every time she said something about Italian, I went, ay, 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 ay.
And that's what told you you're interested in Italian?
Somehow it must have told me that in this dream, but anyhow, she took me to this doctor named Mario, and Mario gave me this Italian injection to help cure whatever I had.
Did it cure it?
Yeah, and I still got effects from it, I think.
If you could go anywhere in the world to take pictures, where would you go?
Yeah. Take a close guess.
France.
No
Jamaica.
way, Giuseppe.
How about
The Antarctic.
No way, Giuseppe.
how about the Galapagos?
You're not even close.
How about California?
Still not close.
New Jersey.
Still not close.
North Carolina?
Think way, way over there.
Greece.
Closer.
How about Italy?
Yeah! You got it on the spot.
That was Cassie. So the other videos are actually up on YouTube if you want to see them. It was more about getting people to go walk around their neighborhood with a blindfold. And I'm in the mission, so I was like walking around and I bumped right into some gang members. And they were like, you better back the up. And so I had these interactions in my neighborhood using my other senses in an odd sort of way that just shakes up how I thought in the world. And so anything like that, I think, you could actually apply that sort of thing. It's almost like just taking something and turning on its head. Like when I think about like even doing like blind students learning photography, for me, at least for me personally, ideas come from just taking something and doing the opposite. And a lot of times that doesn't make sense. It's too arbitrary just to do that. But if you do it and then take the opposite, sometimes you're like, oh, I didn't look at it that way. And then that would lead to something that would be an odd combination. But it works. Like I wouldn't think blind photography would work, but then trying it, then it worked. But usually it works in ways you don't expect it to work. So that's what it is. You tried something and then you're just open to other ways that it works. I don't know. Everybody here seems so experiential. It seems like you could do a ton of things. You probably do the blind photography challenge here. I mean, and just get people to talk about other sensory stuff. I don't know. But I think that's a great point. It's all, I mean, that's the whole postcards is about shifting how you see. Like our frames of reference personally, and I'm sure other folks are like this, you've had experiences, whether it's school or individuals, that had shifted your frame of reference. And what are those? And the work that we do in the world is about shifting the way people see.
Turn off our Wi-Fi for a day.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion for you. It's been tried in Bell's lab, so it's not an original suggestion from me. The idea is to put a rear view mirror right in front of you and walk backwards only for the whole day and see how that changes your perspective about things. Yeah.
That's a great idea. I mean, I get so lazy that I don't do things like that a lot of times. I mean, I'll do them, but I should do them more often because it takes a lot of effort, and I'm like, I'm so comfortable and used to the way my life is. To do something that just shakes it up is, I don't do it enough.
There's also a simpler exercise, which is to use, like if you're right-handed, use only your left hand for one day, and again see how that changes your perception of the world.
Yeah, the Artist's Way actually has a lot of activities like that are about using the other side of your brain. But yeah, go ahead.
The question is, which aspect of leadership or which quality of a leader do you think is most overlooked in an average company?
I would say I was going to say that being able to see the bigger picture. I mean, it's a little bit like what Barack Obama. If you look at Barack Obama as the CEO of this country, I mean, that he gave that speech about race in Philadelphia and was able to talk and acknowledge both sides in a way that people felt heard. It's that complexity. I mean, there's this great thing, Oliver Wendell Holmes has this quote, there's two kinds of simplicity. There's simplicity on this side of complexity, and there's simplicity on the other side of complexity. And he was like, I wouldn't give a fig for the first kind, but I'd give my life for the second kind of simplicity. And it's that, I think that ability to see the bigger picture, but being able to relate to all the parts so that actually people feel heard, and you can get people to buy into the larger vision. I think that's hard. I don't know if that's overlooked, though. Maybe it's the relationships that CEOs have. I heard Alana told me when we were talking about this thing that she could walk up to Eric anytime, and I'm sure you all have that same experience. And just to be able to walk up to the founders and the CEO, I think that is unusual and overlooked, how important that is. I don't know. What do you think? What's most overlooked?
Selflessness. In an organization, it's really easy to get caught up with individual performance and promotion and the impact on me, is my general experience. I joined Google just a couple of months ago, and my experience here is different, actually. And before I got here, it was selflessness. I just found that was most overlooked.
Cool. Thank you all.